Big Mouth struck again last night.
Page 10. Sending
You're
a
asking
school
me to
newsletter
go.
home
You're
at the
asking me to
beginning
leave
of
the
each
air.
term is a
Hold on.
best practice for
Okay,
keeping
cut his
parents,
mic.
guardians,
Cut his
and
mic.
caregivers informed.
Cut his mic. You're asking me to leave the air and go to my office, dig up a quote, come back here and hold it up to the camera. That segment with Warren Kinsella generated a lot of chatter on air last night. There were lots of emails, tweets, Facebooks, blog comments. Plenty of you liked the segment and thought I took the day. Others backed Warren. Some of you, but not many, weren't too happy with me. Bradley Hengen from Saskatchewan wrote to me saying, I was shouting Warren down too much. He said, you just appear to not be able to handle dissenting opinion. It looked bad. How it looked is up to you, the viewer, to decide, but the idea that I can't handle dissenting opinion is plain wrong. I invite Kinsella and others on the show precisely because they have different and dissenting opinions, and that's why Warren Kinsella will be back, even though many of you say he shouldn't be. But while I can handle dissenting opinions, what I cannot have is someone claiming a different set of facts. And Kinsella claimed that the poll we commissioned on the sex ed curriculum proposed by McGuinty was based on a false premise. He called it a lie. Nothing could be further from the truth. When I told Abacus Data CEO David Coletto that I wanted to gauge public opinion on Dalton McGuinty's proposals on sex ed, he said it had to be an accurate representation. Coletto is a serious pollster. So here's what we did. We wanted to ask about teaching children in grade 3 about the full variety of sexual identities put forward in the curriculum. Here's what the 2010 curriculum said about teaching gender to grade 3. You can find this on page 110. Describe how visible differences and invisible differences, such as gender identity, sexual orientation, make each person unique and identify ways of showing respect for differences in others. It's no problem teaching respect, but gender identity, what's that? Well, it's not defined there, but it is later in the curriculum. So rather than ask a vague question about a term that means nothing to most people, we asked about the full gamut. Here is the full question that was asked as it was asked to those participating in the poll. The question was, the Ontario government is considering a new sex education curriculum for elementary school children. Do you think it is very appropriate, somewhat inappropriate, or very inappropriate to teach the following to students at the identified age and grade level? Gender identity, which includes male, female, two-spirited, transgender, transsexual, intersexed, as well as sexual orientation such as heterosexual, lesbian, gay, lesbian, and bisexual in grade 3, which is roughly age 8. That is a neutral question based on McGuinty's own government proposal from 2010. It was a curriculum he defended at first until protest from parents became too loud. He said he'd heard from parents and that he was going back to the drawing board. But one of his key ministers, Glenn Murray, said the only reason this was pulled was because of knuckle draggers. The right-wing reactionary homophobes just love these issues. That was Murray in 2011, back in February. Murray and fellow cabinet ministers, Kathleen Wynne, who used to be in charge of education, the current education minister, Laurel Broughton, well, they all say that old curriculum is coming back. I don't think that the topics I just showed you are age appropriate for grade 3, and that's what this is about, making sure that what is taught to children is age appropriate. Kinsella also claimed it was a false premise to say that a teacher's guide says parents should not be alerted when sensitive issues are raised in the classroom. He read from page 10 of a Toronto District School Board curriculum guide, which says, here's the quote, this is the one he was reading last night, sending a school letter home at the beginning of each term is a best practice for keeping parents, guardians, caregivers informed. Kinsella was able to read that on the air. You heard it. That's the only part that Kinsella wanted you to hear. Here's the full section that comes from. It says, should schools send notes or permission slips home before starting any classroom work about curricular issues that may involve discussions about discrimination and harassment? The answer, no. The TDSB, that's Toronto District School Board, Equity Foundation statement and commitments to equity policy implementation states that each school has a responsibly, that's how they put it. Responsibility, I'm sure they mean. A responsibility to education that reflects the diversity of its students and their life experiences, singling out one group or topic area as too controversial. And depending upon parent, guardian, caregiver discretion, shifts this responsibility from the school to the parents, guardians, caregivers, and fosters a poisoned environment contrary to the TDSB human rights policy. Then we get to the part Kinsella was reading from. It continues, sending a school newsletter home at the beginning of each term is a best practice for keeping parents, guardians, caregivers informed of all upcoming equity topics in the classroom without having to single out one topic over the other. Now here are two other sections of that same guide Kinsella was quoting from. It says, should schools send notes or permission slips home before starting any classroom work on LGBTQ issues? No. If a school treats the topic of sexual orientation or anti-homophobia work differently from the range of other curriculum topics, this could be construed as discriminatory practice. They also asked, can a parent have their child accommodated out of human rights education based on religious grounds? No. Religious accommodation in the TDSB is carried out in the larger context of the secular education system. While the TDSB works to create a school system free from religious discrimination, this freedom is not absolute. These are both from a teacher's curriculum guide currently in use in Toronto at the biggest school board in the country. You and I can disagree on whether the way the curriculum guide puts it is the right way or the wrong way, but you can't say that it doesn't say don't tell parents about these things, don't send home permission slips, don't send home notes saying this is going to happen. Something that's sent home saying we may discuss some issues sometime in the year, and then say, no, you can't pull your kids out. No, we're not going to tell you when it's happening. Well, that's clearly what the guide says. Kinsella, McGuinty, and the rest of the Liberals want to claim this poll is false. But it is they who are trying to pull the wool over your eyes. Every question is based on either a proposed or existing piece of curriculum, save the last question, which simply asked who should have more say, parents or experts. McGuinty and his cabinet are out of step with the majority of people, and they know this. But unless you speak up firmly and politely, wherever you live, to whatever politicians you have, unless you speak up firmly and politely, unlike Warren, then they will start teaching school children material that most people say is wrong.